You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right. Another week, and the Eagles are back on a win streak as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 211. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I catch up with NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell to break down what we saw from the tape in the Eagles' dismantling of the New York Jets in Week 5. A lot to break down on both sides of the football from that matchup. And then we will move forward to this week's game against the Minnesota Vikings. The Eagles travel back up to the friendly confines of Minneapolis, so that will be a fun game to break down. We'll do that in Chalk Talk. After that, we will advance then to my scouting report segment, where I will read my notes on Minnesota running back Dalvin Cook and his game coming out of Florida State back in 2017. A lot of similarities between the player that he was in college to where he is now in the NFL, with one big crucial difference in my mind. We'll get to that in that segment, but let's not waste any more time. Let's get to Chalk Talk now with Greg Cosell.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, joining us once again here on Chalk Talk on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, is Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome back.
Fran?
It's week 6. Big Eagles win streak, first win streak of the season.
Right. They're all big. Wins are all big. There's only 16 games.
As Doug Peterson says, winning is tough in the NFL, and there's only 16, so you need to win as many of them as you can. We talked about last week what the beginning of the season's all about, and it's about stacking wins. So the Eagles have done that now 2 weeks in a row. Going into a big stretch. This is a huge
3 road games in a row, right?
Stretch. Yeah, 3 home games in a row, and then even on the back end of that, you've got some tough ones as well coming back at home. So
it's Minnesota,
Dallas, followed by, who am I missing there? I'm only looking at the next 2 weeks.
It's a tough one. It's another tough one.
It's a tough 3-game stretch.
Buffalo?
And yes, I think it is Buffalo.
It's Buffalo.
And then I'm pulling up the schedule now on the Eagles official app, which you should be downloading if you don't already have it. So I'm glad that I have it so that I can quickly pull up the Eagles schedule, which would tell me that as I'm buying time, the Eagles.
There you go. Not as quick as you thought.
Minnesota on the road next week. Then you got Sunday Night Football the week after that against Dallas. You've got the Buffalo Bills on the road. Then you've got the Chicago Bears at home. Bye week. Patriots at home. Seahawks at home. That's a hell of a 6-game stretch.
But you have Chicago at home so you essentially have 3 home games in a row.
You have 3 home games
after the 3 road games.
Correct, with a bye week in there, and then you wrap it up with the Miami Dolphins, and then 4 division games.
It's a tough schedule.
There's your stretch. There's the season right there.
Right.
It's a really important stretch.
Well,
here
you can argue
up.
the next 3 weeks are kind of the season because you certainly can't lose all 3 games on the road.
Yeah, you don't want to lose all 3. I wouldn't say it's the season, but this is a season defining stretch over the next 6. It's you kind of figure out, all right, what is this team made of? What are we looking at here? But ultimately, look, you're going off what this past performance was. Defensively, we'll start on defense. It was an all-timer performance in terms of the stat sheet. I mean, 10 sacks, second all-time for this Eagles franchise.
Yeah.
Against obviously, a Jets team that we talked about has issues.
Look, I think you have to be realistic. It's a good performance, and you want a good performance against bad teams. What you wanted was what happened in this game, where you go out in front, and not that you're cruising, but you're basically playing with house money, so to speak, because you're ahead. The Eagles did some good things on defense with their pressure concepts. Clearly, Jim Schwartz, who does not blitz the way he did this week normally, and with the variety and diversity of blitzes that we did see, which clearly are in the playbook, but he does not use a lot of those that often. I mean, I can remember, was it the first Skandrick sack maybe?
The slot and corner
and
pressure.
the corner cat by Douglas from the boundary.
He dropped both D tackles.
Right, and the blitz by Skandrick.
Yep.
So we really I don't recall seeing that particular blitz this year. Maybe it happened.
No, they ran it a couple times in the game, but
I don't recall seeing it prior to this game.
No, I don't believe so.
So clearly he felt, given the offensive line issues, the young quarterback who's, and you hate to use this word, but I'm not sure of another word right now, was a little panicky prior to this game, and it showed up in this game. So, Jim felt that this was a good way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you pair the blitzes with the stunts, and when you have that with look, this is a team coming off the bye, but you have two new pieces in it on the offensive line. You had a new left guard in Alex Lewis, a new right tackle, and a rookie, Chuma Edoga. So you're saying, all right, well, if from a stunt perspective, and you're putting stress on those guys, telling them to communicate and pass guys off, guys that aren't used to lining up next to each other.
Right.
That puts a little bit of stress on them in those situations.
No, and I think it's funny you say that about Edoga because I thought that that first 3rd and long, 3rd and 9, when I guess it was Graham's first sack.
Yep.
No, I'm thinking of the Skandrick forced sack, forced fumble, actually.
Okay.
I thought they did a really good job of pressuring Edoga mentally because Sweat lined up outside, not super wide, but outside Edoga.
Yep.
And he obviously then slanted inside because Skandrick was coming, but just his mere alignment made Edoga pause because that was his guy pre-snap.
Yep.
And then just that pause allowed Skandrick to get the edge.
Yep.
Simple things like that for a young player like Edoga who probably hasn't seen much of what the Eagles did,
Not in the Pac-12.
No, not in the Pac-12. Little things like that, subtle, nuanced things like that really lead to big plays.
Yeah, and what I liked also from that blitz in particular was, you drop Vinny Curry into the passing lane, so they were hoping to hit Jamison Crowder on the shallow, and once that was taken away, Luke Falk, you're talking about that from a quarterback standpoint.
Know better, Fran.
Yeah, to cut that,
they
saw
were
that
in
off.
zone.
Yeah.
He's running right to get covered. He should have settled down, and there would have been a throw.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying Falk would have thrown it, but he was looking at Crowder.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I'm sure he's being coached because he's a veteran. He should have known better.
That's fair. Yeah, I think ultimately the Eagles were able to break down protection.
Right.
They were able to get home. I think a lot of people are saying, talking about the blitz, and they did. I did all the numbers in my Eagle Eye in the Sky column, recapping that performance. Right. They blitzed just about 50% of dropbacks, 50% of snaps, and you run against the run. It was 50% as well.
Clearly meant for that game. My guess is you're not going to see that on a weekly basis.
In your experience talking with coaches in the past, with defensive coaches, when you get into a game like that, I would think that one other positive to come from that is that you're also breaking tendencies as well. You have these coaches coming up in the next few games that are going to be running reports and running cut-ups. Oh, what have they done in the last 4? All those blitzes, they kind of throw off tendencies a little bit for when these teams now are preparing for the Eagles in the next few weeks.
Well, the other interesting thing, too, and again, we assume that his game plan probably did have more blitzes in it. But it's also possible that when the game started playing out and the Eagles got ahead 14-0, I think they went ahead 14-0 on the Nate Gary pick, correct?
Yes,
right.
Correct.
And when that happened, it's also possible that Coach Schwartz just said, you know what, we're just calling blitzes.
Yep.
Maybe if the game, for whatever reason, was 7-3 in the middle of the second quarter, who knows?
Yeah.
But the game played out, and they just kept coming and coming and coming. And I also loved what they did with Brandon Graham. He lined up basically 4-5 technique, whatever you'd like to call it, but he was basically a defensive tackle, even though he was lined up over the offensive tackle.
Yep.
And he had, I think, all 3 of his sacks, came
inside.
from that spot.
Yep.
So they did some good things there. They're moving people around. The nice thing about someone like Orlando Skandrick, and he's later in his career, so he's probably not the athlete that he was earlier in his career.
Sure.
He's had a nice NFL career.
Yeah.
Is he probably picks things up pretty quickly. He was here in camp.
Yep.
So he understood. He came in, played the slot. He's played a lot of slot in his career. So you get someone like that. You're not, even though he's technically a street free agent, it's not the same as bringing in, let's say, a 22-year-old rookie free agent.
Of course. Yeah, no, I think
that's critical. I think that allowed them to do a lot of the things that they did.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past in this podcast,
Yeah.
just, the reliance on veterans. I think when you have a team that's competing for a Super Bowl as opposed to a team that's kind of on the rise, I don't think the New York Jets, if they had a problem at slot corner, they may not be looking at a guy like Orlando Skandrick.
Right.
They may be looking at a young piece that they want to try and grow. But the Eagles, you go in and get a guy like Skandrick, he comes in, and this was going back to the summer, he comes in, he competes, he makes the rest of your room better, and now you've got a guy that if you do run into a pinch later in the season, you bring back in this kind of scenario,
No question.
and he's ready to play.
Yep.
You might be surprised. 7 of the 10 sacks came out of a 4-man rush.
That is correct.
Yeah, which I went
No,
back.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, charting. And look, the blitzes were very prevalent, and Luke Falk struggled against the blitz. There's no getting around that. I thought he got a little bit better against it in the third quarter and moving on. But overall, the 4-man rush was very productive for them. They ran a lot of different stunts, as we mentioned. Brandon Graham moved inside. All 3 of those sacks, like you said, came inside. Fletcher Cox didn't end up with a sack, but I thought he impacted the game, had a couple of really nice rushes. I thought he helped force that interception by Rodney McLeod as well.
Yeah, I think that a number of the plays I saw, I felt that Cox really had inside pressure that got Falk, who was a little antsy to begin with.
Yep.
But I think it got him moving.
Sure.
And that stuff doesn't show up in a box score, but Cox is a guy that is critical to what this team does. I like when they line him up as a zero technique. I think that's which they did a number of times.
And they
in this
did it
game.
on that play, on the McLeod play. He was a zero.
Yep.
Why do you like that so much?
Well, I think you get a one-on-one with the center, and if you choose to help him with either of the guards, I think that sets up other things.
Yeah.
So I think it works if it stays as a one-on-one because he's pretty much going to overmatch any center in the league. And as I said, if the offense decides that they want to slide or they want to do some things, you'll know that, and then you can play off that and counter that.
Yeah, to me, like that's what has always been so attractive about that front where they do slide BG inside or any other D end inside is that now you're forcing an offense to kind of pick their poison. Are you going to try and slide towards the best player on the line in Fletcher Cox, or are you going to slide towards a 2 DN side? Because typically, when you have 2 DNs lining up on one side of the formation, that's sending off alarm bells that there could be some kind of a stunt and you want to slide that way. So you're forcing an offense to choose.
Question, because normally if you have 3 defensive linemen to one side of the center, and it can be a zero technique, but 3 on the center or to one side of the center.
Yep.
Normally, and again, it's probably not 100%, but it's a high percentage.
I think it's over 85.
You're going to get some form of a stunt.
Yep. No, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
They did a good amount of that in this game. Let's go over to the offensive side. Look, not as productive, not as efficient as they were the week before against Green Bay. And I think a lot of people will say, "Oh man, like what happened with the offense in this game?" And I would say, "All right, well, what about the week before against Green Bay?" And then they played extremely well in that game.
Right.
No, look, I think you look at penalties in this game. They had some untimely ones that you could argue whether or not they were penalties at all. But at the end of the day, they were penalties, and they set the offense back. I think that was one of the bigger things that kind of hurt this unit throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it was a great performance.
Yeah.
The reality is, and look, we try to be fair and unbiased when we talk. They have some limitations weapon-wise. They don't really have a vertical threat right now, so the offense is somewhat condensed. So it's an offense that, for the most part, has to really, matriculate the ball down the field. The run game was reasonably effective again.
Yep.
They still do some really nice things in the run game. But the pass game, does have some limitations.
Yeah.
And if you take a shot, let's say you take a shot and you think one is there and you don't hit it, it becomes magnified because it's not a team that is going to right now take a lot of deep shots with Deshaun Jackson not playing. So sometimes it looks like it's magnified.
Yeah, I think the stat that blew me away, and I wasn't even aware of it. Obviously, we knew that the Eagles were first in the NFL on third down entering the game. But they ran with a stat on the broadcast early on. I think coming into the game, they had converted 15 straight third downs of 4 yards or fewer. And they hit on the first 2 in the game, so they were 17 of 17. That's remarkable.
But ultimately, that's the offense that they are now, in the sense that they're trying to get to that.
Yeah, but it's also that's very hard to sustain.
It's very hard to do, which
that's what makes it tough. Yeah.
Which it makes it really difficult, and you can also get stuck. Granted, that's phenomenal. It probably won't stay that way.
It can't.
Just the percentages tell you
it
won't.
In the game, right?
Right. The percentages tell you it won't. But it's very hard in this league, no matter who the opponent, by the way. And by the way, not that we're speaking a lot about the Jets, but I thought a number of Jets defenders actually flashed in this game.
They did. They played well.
Yeah.
They competed well.
They competed well.
Defensively,
yeah.
Yes.
So that's just a hard thing to do. But when all's said and done, with the way this offense is now, without a true vertical threat, is they have to sustain offense.
Yep.
And obviously, you want to get to third downs where it is 4 or less, because that opens up your playbook in terms of what you can call, because the run game is still in play.
Yep.
But it's just a hard deal. It's a hard deal to go 9, 10, 11, 12 plays in this league with consistency and score touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it's certainly the way that they have to play offense. And that's the thing is, when you play that way, you're saying, okay, we need to matriculate the ball. That's going to result in a lot of plays. Lots of plays mean more opportunities for something to go wrong. It could be a drop. It could be a bad read by a running back. It could be an errant throw by the quarterback, a missed block. All those things kind of come into play. So if you don't have that big play element, now you just need full team exexecution across
They don't
the board.
get many chunk plays.
Right now.
Right now.
Yes.
Correct. But it's funny you mentioned running backs. I think one thing that continues to stand out is the way Sanders and Howard as well block. in the pass game.
Oh, man. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Because Sanders had a great block on a play, which I think was an incomplete pass, maybe?
It was an incomplete pass.
But, I mean, it was a great block.
Corner cat blitz.
Yeah.
And he saw it early.
Yeah.
And he
who was it? Was it?
I think it was
Trumaine Johnson
no,
or Darryl
I think it was
Roberts?
Darryl
Roberts. Yeah.
I mean, he leveled him.
And I thought even the play where of course, everybody's speaking about the play where Carson Wentz ducked under.
Yep.
I thought Howard did a great job.
110%.
Because, look, let's take nothing away from Carson Wentz. He's phenomenal doing those kinds of things.
I'm so glad you went down this road. Yeah.
But when all's said and done, it was an inside stun, and Quinnen Williams basically got clean to the quarterback.
It was very well designed by New York.
Correct.
They did a lot to kind of break down the protection. They got Quinnen in front.
Right, and Howard at the last moment, because Williams is not his guy.
Right.
He's a defensive tackle.
Nope.
And at the last moment, he saw him and just was able to shove him. And again, taking nothing away from Carson Wentz, when you saw it live, it looked actually even better than it was. But Williams got pushed enough by Howard that he really wasn't as big a factor, as it looked live.
Yeah.
And that was a great job by Howard, because that was a recognition issue, not just a physical execution issue.
It was. We watched it this afternoon, and Ben Fennell and I were. Yeah, great play by Carson, but outstanding job by Jordan Howard.
Oh, yeah.
He actually started to that side.
He started to the left, looking outside.
He started over to that side and came back around and was able to just get enough for Quinnen Williams.
But having said that throw by Wentz, given what happened, and that was a staple play. I'm sure you remember the play in detail.
Yes.
It was Dagger with the over route by Ertz.
Right.
And to come up and make that throw with the accuracy that he
On
did,
the money.
as if nothing happened, was pretty impressive.
Yes.
He makes a few of those plays here and there.
He makes those kind of throws here and there. I would say, too, while we're talking about the running backs, let's just continue that discussion. Yeah, in the pass game. But then also just even overall, I think I'd like to talk just about the dynamic between Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders, because I think one of the big storylines, I guess, from a media standpoint, coming out of Monday's press conference was, Doug Peterson was asked about the running back rotation and how does he see Jordan Howard, and he said, well, look, I kind of view him as maybe the lead back and Sanders not being the lead back for the time being. If there's a hot hand, then I'm going to go with the hot hand.
Or the way a given game plays out.
Right. And I think a lot of people kind of ran with that, but I think that's kind of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. I don't think that's like far away from what we've seen the last 2 or 3 weeks.
I think this is a team that decided against Green Bay that they needed to really try to get a run game going.
Yeah.
And Green Bay helped by how they played. Of course, the Jets played nickel, I think, on every snap in the game, too. Yeah. But I think when you're trying to get the run game going as a foundational element, then Howard is the guy you really use to do that.
Yeah.
And Sanders becomes a bit of a complement
in
that. Now, if you get into a game where you feel that you have some positive matchups in the pass game and you maybe need to throw the ball a little more, maybe Sanders plays a few more snaps. Maybe that's the way it is against Minnesota. Who knows?
Yep.
But obviously Sanders is a very good receiver. They got him on the wheel route. Now, I think that was the
Take
first.
us through that play,
Yeah, I made a note of that play, too. Now, that was, I believe, the first play. It was the first play of the second possession.
Yep.
Now, there's no way they knew, in my view. Maybe they didn't.
That they were going to make this check? No, I don't know.
That the Jets were going to be in a Fire X blitz, and that Phillips, the defensive end, was going to be running on a wheel route with Sanders.
Well,
I mean, maybe they did know that.
Well,
because coaches know a lot of things.
They start out in empty, and Miles Sanders lined up outside, and Cashman was on a one-on-one.
Right.
So to me, he's like, okay, that's man coverage. Let's go to mesh. I like this matchup. It's mesh, and we're going to play mesh versus man.
And then the Jets,
they make that check.
They make a check,
and then you got a better matchup than you were expecting.
Right. So the Jets make a check, and they go to that Fire X inside blitz. So the two inside backers, Cashman and Ewert, blitz.
Yep.
So now what that means is the outside linebacker, Phillips,
who was a D-tackle DN at Tennessee.
Right. He's the only one now who can run on the wheel with Sanders.
You're going to take that.
So you felt pretty good about that.
Same play, by the way, same play that Jordan Howard scored on against Green Bay. Like same exact play. Staple play in the Eagles playbook. Staple play.
Right, and probably initially the Eagles thought they would get something very similar because of what you said about Cashman being outside and coming back in.
Yeah, my guess is that they saw that and said, okay, like that's our man indicator.
Right.
Let's now go to our man beater, one of our best man beaters in mesh, and we'll play this out.
Right, and he'll have to work through the traffic, and the same thing that happened against Green Bay with Jordan Howard will happen here.
Yeah.
And the Jets changed, which you can argue that Greg Williams, the DC for the Jets, made a real nice call, but he got burnt.
He got burnt. I think it'll be just, when you look at these two guys and just how they, because, to me, Jordan Howard, the tone setter early on in the game, he's going to be not their foundation, but he's going to be, it's kind of like, he's, when you want to run the football against these teams, Jordan Howard is a guy, and he's running really, really well right now.
Without question. And he's a sustaining runner, and that's what this offense is now. That's why he's so critical, because maybe Sanders gives you a little more explosiveness, but at the end of the day, what this offense is now built on is sustaining the football. And you need Sanders is probably not ready to turn 2-yard gains into 5-yard gains on a consistent basis, whereas Howard is. That's what Howard is as a runner.
How dissimilar is it to what the dynamic was in New Orleans for the last few years with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara?
Well, in all honesty, I think both those backs are better than what the Eagles have.
I'm just saying in terms of the dynamic.
But you're talking about the style?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a similar style.
Yeah.
You have a guy in Howard who's a really good inside runner, and you have a player like Sanders who certainly can work on the perimeter and can work on the perimeter in the pass game.
Yeah. It's
going to be interesting.
That's going to be how you're going to kind of view that moving forward. I thought the offensive line, run game, Brandon Brooks moving people one time. He had another really strong game.
Although I'll tell you what, I thought watching the tape, and again, the Jets attacked the interior of the Eagles' offensive line with their pressure schemes.
Yep.
And they obviously felt that was an area that they could attack. And they had, I don't want to say they had success where they shut down the Eagles' offense, but I thought there were a few too many plays that were problematic and that need to be cleaned up for this week.
They're going to get a big test this week with what Minnesota can do from a pressure standpoint. Let's just transition down to the Minnesota Vikings, and a team that the Eagles have seen. They're very familiar with what Mike Zimmer and what they're trying to do from a defensive standpoint. I believe every year Doug Peterson's been here, the Eagles have played the Minnesota Vikings, whether it's regular season or postseason. So two very familiar foes.
Right. When did they play them last year?
They played them relatively early. It was around the same time. Might have been the same week last year. It was week 5, week 6.
It was early.
It was week 5, week 6.
Yeah.
Might have even been week 4. Derek Barnett got hurt in the game.
Right.
The Eagles lost the game.
I remember, because it was early for sure.
It was early, yeah. So when we talk about this Mike Zimmer defense, and the longtime listeners will be aware of what this defense is about, but high pressure scheme in terms of the threat of pressure is always there.
Right, but it's interesting. It's funny you say that because they had not been a big blitz team until this week, and they blitzed a lot this week.
They blitzed a lot against Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Now, again, we don't know if it was Daniel Jones, the Giants' O-line, but they blitzed a lot.
Yeah.
But their core, as a core defense, they're predominantly an over-front 4-3.
Yep.
Which means that the 3 technique is to the strong side of the formation.
To the tight end side, yep.
To the tight end side. They play a lot of split safety. Quarters, cover 4 is a foundational coverage for them. And that's why Andrew Sendejo is so good there. It's why Anthony Harris can function there, because Anthony Harris is another safety that's not a pure box safety, and he's not a pure post safety. But when you play split safety and cover 4, Anthony Harris can be an effective player.
Sure. And when you look at their foundation from a pressure standpoint over the last few years, we've talked about those split mug looks, those double A gap looks.
They don't do that as much as they used to.
Yeah, it's the threat of it is always there. Yeah. But they went with a little bit more diamond front this past week.
A little more diamond front, meaning 5 across.
Yep.
With Barr, and Barr is their pressure linebacker.
Yes.
Rarely is Kendricks the blitzer. I mean, obviously nothing's 100%, but rarely is Kendricks the extra rusher. It's normally Barr. This week, a high percentage of the time came from the outside in that diamond 5 across front, but he can come from inside as well, and that depends on the opponent. It depends on the week.
Yeah, so what we're seeing more is the more of that diamond front, more bear looks as well.
Which everybody in the NFL is doing.
To be working
that seems
ends,
to be one of the trends over the last year or two, that everybody's doing, that 5 across bear front that everybody runs out of nickel.
So it's the 2 guys standing up over the edge with the 3 interior a little bit more condensed and covering up the 2 guards in the center.
Right. You have a 0 technique over the center and a 3 technique sort of off the shoulder, the outside shoulder of the offensive guards.
The team that we last saw that used it a good amount was Atlanta. What are the big strengths of what is the defense hoping to accomplish with a front like that?
Well, you're theoretically clogging up the middle.
Yeah.
Ideally, that's what you're trying to do,
Yeah.
Ideally, that's what you're trying to do,
Yep.
is clog up the middle. 2-3 techniques are tougher for an offensive line to handle than, let's say, a normal four-man front. They're tougher to block in the run game. So teams do that. I would imagine you'll see some of that, particularly when Jordan Howard's in the game.
Yep.
Because he's an inside runner. They normally don't get him on the outside. Now, that's a front where you can wham that front.
Sure.
So it would not
Yeah.
surprise me to see the wham game as part of the Eagles' offense this week. And by wham, just so people can visualize it, you bring a tight end. It's almost always a tight end in the Eagles' case. You bring him from sort of just outside the formation, and he takes care of one of the 3 techniques. And that makes the front now easier to block because you have an extra body that's not an offensive lineman to block. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that. It wouldn't surprise me to see maybe a little trap game this week as well against that front, because that also can take care of a penetrating 3 technique.
The side note, the Jets tried to wham Fletcher one play. It was the third quarter, I believe, and he read it the whole way.
Right.
Saw the blocker coming, chucked him, and was able to make the play in the backfield. I think from a front standpoint, the other big thing that's very interesting is, they get Everson Griffin back. He was missed most of last week. He did not play, and they get killer spin move. He's been beating with people with it all season long.
Oh, my God. He made Nate Solder look pretty bad a couple of times.
He got him a couple times.
But it's not just been Nate Solder.
Jake Matthews, he got a couple times in the Atlanta game, week 1. He's gotten a few
That's
people
a
with
test for both, because he plays both sides. That's a test for both Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, who, by the way, I think Lane Johnson's playing really good football.
Yes. That holding penalty was a bit questionable.
But, I just think he's become, he's been good, but, he's just a really solid right tackle.
He really is. I think when you've got, that front, Everson Griffin, Donnell Hunter off the other side, what they'll do is they go into a little bit of a speed package where you've got those two. They'll put Anthony Barr up on the line of scrimmage and way some of those look. Stephen Weatherly. They've got one of our guys from Northwestern, Ifeadi Odenigbo. He'll line him up
That's
inside.
easy for you to say.
Well, I try and sneak it in there when I can.
I liked him, as you know, coming out.
Yeah.
I really did. And again, we'll see how his career goes, but I'm glad to see. See, I think he's with a team now where he could thrive in kind of a rotational role.
Yeah.
Because I think that style of defense fits him.
And Hercules Mataafa is a sub-package interior rusher.
You're
for
good
them.
with the names, Fran.
I just kind of roll them off. That's what we do in the Journey to the Draft podcast. We talk about these guys all year round.
Good for you.
Well, Mataafa is a guy that also kind of fits into that scheme.
Without question.
A sub-package
Washington
rusher
State, right?
Washington State.
Because Washington State under that, is that coordinator still there?
Nah, he just left, actually.
Because remember how much movement they did with their defensive fronts?
They moved guys all over.
All over, yeah.
Yeah, so when they
Where'd
rotate,
he go, by the way?
Tracy Claeys literally just stepped down this past weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so really rough go out there for the Cougars to start. But I think when you look at this defensive front, they've got those athletic guys they mix and match. And then they've got those two guys that I think, they want to hang their hats on stuffing the run on early downs with Linval Joseph and Shamar Stephen as well.
The Connecticut kid, another guy I really like coming out of college. For just this role.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of how and Jaleel Johnson, another rotational player. They play a lot of guys up front. So that's the kind of the thing to know about this Minnesota defense. One play, it'll look one way. Next down, it could look completely different. And
I agree.
I think they're also doing a better job this year of disguising and changing things up kind of late in the pre-snap
I think they've been a little more
phase.
multiple front this year.
Yeah. The very first sack of the year, actually, against Atlanta, they lined up one way. I want to say they lined up in their typical 4-3 over front. Very late, shot clock is coming down. They shift down, they slide the D end in. Anthony Barr comes down, and the offense didn't account for him. He came in scot-free.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of different things from disguise this year. So big test, mentally, physically, for this Eagles team.
It's a very big
front.
test.
It's a very, very good front.
And the thing is I'll tell you, Mike Hughes is a really good slot corner.
Oh, man, he made a dynamite play.
He's a really good slot corner.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting when Mackenzie Alexander, who's been, I guess, inactive, and I don't know what they're going to do, because last year Mackenzie Alexander was a really good slot corner.
Right.
But the one thing that's interesting watching the tape, and again, that's what we do, Fran, we watch the tape, is I think at this point, Xavier Rhodes does not run very well.
I thought it in the preseason.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's
I
preseason.
thought I started noticing it last year a little bit.
Yeah, you watched it a little closer last year, late in the year. I didn't see it.
I mean, now, again, it gets back to the fact that without Deshaun Jackson, the Eagles don't really have someone who can run by Xavier Rhodes.
Right.
But he's not as good on the deep ball as he once was.
And the Giants also went after Trey Waynes, a couple double moves that should have hit. They should have been big plays.
He's very vulnerable to double moves. He's always been in his career.
Yep.
Very athletic guy, but he's always been vulnerable to those moves.
So Xavier Rhodes is the right corner, Trey Waynes the left corner, Mike Hughes the nickel, who will spot duty on the outside as well.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me, though, because I don't think they have to worry about Alshon going deep. It wouldn't surprise me if Jeffrey if Rhodes matches up with Jeffrey, which they've done that before
in the past. I think they did it during the NFC title game.
Yeah.
I don't think they've done it this year at all.
Yeah,
depending on who they played.
Yeah. Now they may not because the other wide receiver is likely to be Mac Hollins,
right?
Who's big, so they may feel no problem.
Sure. And then you've got Harrison Smith, one of the better safeties in the league, an interchangeable player, can come downhill and defend the run very well. Quick thoughts on Harrison Smith?
Oh, just a really good player. The kind of player that can be really impactful in the run game and the pass game. And you mentioned earlier about a little disguise. He's one of those guys that's a master of disguise.
Very good.
He's really good at kind of holding his water, as the expression is, and not moving until the last possible moment and just showing you one thing and then getting to something else. Really good at that. Also, when they do decide to blitz, and it's not Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith is a very good blitzer off the edge.
No question. Let's go over to the other side where this has been the kind of the rejuvenation for this team is, in Mike Zimmer's image, they bring in Gary Kubiak, and now they have become a running football team. Dalvin Cook is playing the best football of his NFL career.
Dynamic and explosive.
Run game, pass game, doesn't matter. They're getting the ball.
Outside zone run game is the foundation. Really good in the screen game.
Yeah.
Multiple screen game. They had a great throwback screen last week.
They'll be breaking that one down on Eagles game plan this week.
They also have conventional screens. They just want to get Cook the ball in space because he's really dynamic.
Yeah, and the tight end screens in there. Receiver, they do a lot from the screen game. Screens and draws. And that's, to me, like if you're an Eagles fan, what's one thing that we know they're going to run the ball. We know Kubiak would play action, boot action. That's what his MO is. To me, I'd go into this and say the Eagles have to make sure that they are buttoned up with the screen game and on those draws. Anything where they're going to try and suck up the defense and then hit them over the top with something late developing. Those
and the
are
Eagles
two things
have
I'd look
typically
for.
been good at this, but it has to be a focus this week in practice, and that's playing the boot.
Yes.
Now, normally they've been good at it.
Yep.
But
4th and 1 this past week. They go boot in midfield.
Right.
Brandon Graham's right in the quarterback's face.
Their DNs have been very good at playing with discipline and not working down the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
Because the boot game is a major part of what the Vikings do.
Yeah.
And they've hit big plays. They hit a touchdown on a really well-designed boot. I think it was against the Raiders a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Where Kirk Cousins booted left, and it was a really nice route by Adam Thielen. And
as he's tend to do.
Yeah, and this week they had a really nice boot where he hit Thielen, and Thielen ended up going for 44 yards. It was a great play design, by the way, and it was a play I really loved. But they do a great job with boot both to the right and to the left, and you've got to be aware of that. You've got to play with discipline. As I said, the Eagles have done that very, very well, but it still must be a fine focus this week in practice.
So take it just for when we say play action and we say boot, what separates a boot play from just a normal play action?
Well, normal play action, the quarterback just drops straight back.
Yep.
Play action boot, he boots out. It's designed movement by the quarterback.
So it's like a fake run right, quarterback rolls left.
Yeah, and they do it off
fake.
their outside zone run game. So the whole idea is that you get the defense theoretically moving one way, and then you boot the other way, and now you create the defense. It's a deception play, really. Yep. It's a misdirection deception play.
Yep.
Because you get the defense reacting to one thing, and that's not what's happening, and now something else is happening that they then have to react to and recover to. So when you boot the quarterback, and it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings handle this, sometimes you can actually bring a blocker out in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Vikings didn't do that the times I've seen them do boot, but we'll see how the Eagles play it. If they feel that that's something that they have to do against the Eagles, maybe they'll do that. Because as we said, the Eagles' defensive end to the side of the boot have been very good at sort of staying home.
Which, by the way, it works both ways because there was one thing, I don't know if you noticed this watching their offense this week. They did this really sneaky thing with the tight end on the backside of their stretch run plays where it's a run play. Let's say it's a run left, and you got the tight end on the right side. the tight end would kind of peel off mid-play, and the backside linebacker, would run back with him. And he also has to respect that boot fake. And the ball, it's a run play the whole way.
Right.
But it's a good way to take care of that backside
No
backer.
question.
They have to respect the boot fake.
Yeah, it's all what we've seen now in the NFL, and the principle probably comes from college, not the exact plays, but you're seeing so much more now with misdirection and deception on basic play concepts.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing that more and more in the NFL.
Yeah, I think it's something that, the boot helps the run, run helps the boot,
right?
And that certainly is a staple of what they do. And it sounds like I tried very hard as I'm putting the show together for Eagles game plan. I didn't want it to be like a broken record because I feel like every week we're saying, all right, got to watch out for stretch run, you got to watch out for play action.
Well,
We've done it with a couple of these teams. That's what everybody's doing.
And by the way, that's what Kirk Cousins is.
Yes.
Obviously we know there's no mystery to Kirk Cousins, okay?
Talk about him as a player overall.
Kirk Cousins is a complementary piece in a well put together and well designed offense. And that's why with Kirk Cousins, you need the play action pass game. You need the play action boot pass game. You need the quick game. Then maybe you get you get some screens.
You get
some screens.
Yep.
Then maybe you get the slot fades.
Hit Adam Thielen for a touchdown.
Right.
Slot fade.
You get schemed throws or timing and rhythm throws.
Yep.
That's what Kirk Cousins is. If he has to do more than that on a regular basis, he'll struggle. Are there games in which he can do it? And in games in which he has done it in his career? Yes. But percentage-wise, Kirk Cousins is a certain kind of quarterback, and you try to play to his strengths. And I think that's one reason why they brought Gary Kubiak in, because that offense plays to his strengths. For people who remember, to me, Kirk Cousins is a lot like Matt Schaub. When Gary Kubiak was the head coach in Houston a number of years ago, and Matt Schaub, I think one year Matt Schaub under Gary Kubiak led the NFL in passing yards. Another quarterback who you wouldn't call a phenomenal arm talent, but can run a schemed offense very effectively.
And remember, Gary Kubiak comes from Mike Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan had Kirk Cousins in Washington, and when he had that success, it's a good match.
And Kyle likes Kirk Cousins because it all starts with the outside zone run game.
Yep. That's the philosophy that they're going with, and right now it's working for them.
But I want to say one more thing, just about where I think the Eagles could potentially. I think they need to have an advantage, despite the running, and I'm sure the running stats are very good.
The running stats are pretty good.
Okay, and Dalvin Cook's been just tremendous. But I think when you watch the tape, Fran, and I don't know your feeling, I think the interior three of the Vikings offensive line have been up and down.
Up and down, I would say it's fair.
I don't think they've been, you look at the rushing numbers and maybe someone says, oh, boy, the offensive line's great.
Yep.
Well, I think the rookie center, Garrett Bradbury, has struggled on and off. I think the left guard, Elflein, he's the left guard, right?
He's probably struggled more than
He's struggled. And I think even the right guard, Josh Klein, has had some struggles.
Yeah.
So, I think that's an area that I think the Eagles have to win that battle.
Yep. I think that would be something where you kind of look at and say, okay, this is an area where we can try and take advantage. I want to ask you about the pass targets as well, because while it is a run game focus offense, I think when you look at Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, probably one of the best receiving duos in the NFL.
They don't really have a third.
They don't, and that's why all the talk about are they going to trade Stephon Diggs? This is a team that's trying to compete to go to the playoffs and play in February. They don't have a third receiver. They came in and BB was kind of their guy. He got hurt. Now they're relying on the rookie BC Johnson.
Who,
nice
by
player.
the way,
I like BC Johnson coming out of Colorado State.
Here you go, Fran.
That's kind of what they're looking at right now. They brought back Laquan Treadwell after releasing him. All right, where are we at? Oh, is this BC Johnson? There we go. You want to read the whole thing or just the transition?
No, you can just read the
Johnson has the look and feel of a professional receiver with his refined understanding of route running and his consistent hands, but there are definite questions about his overall play athleticism and speed and movement. Johnson scored very well in the explosive test of the scouting combine, but he did not play like that on tape. He looked like a short to intermediate receiver who might struggle to win outside as a Z versus quality NFL corners. Can he transition to the NFL as a big slot and work between the numbers versus slot corners, linebackers, and safeties in zone coverage?
What do you think?
I think that's probably spot on where we're at right now. I think when you're looking at those guys, and I like BC Johnson the same way that you did. I thought that he was that kind of a player. Everyone was.
He's part of their pass game. But what's interesting too is on a number of third and longs, they keep Irv Smith in the game and play with two tight ends.
Irv Smith has looked good.
He really moves. Now he hasn't caught a lot of balls yet.
He hasn't.
I would expect that to increase, and I don't know if it starts this week against the Eagles. We don't know that.
Yeah,
but they line him outside, plus splits outside the numbers, and if you didn't know who he was, you'd think he was a big wideout.
He's a sharp route runner.
I agree.
And he gets after it in the run game, too.
And he's not quite as big as most tight ends.
Yep.
I think he was 241 or 242 at the combine, so he doesn't look like a big tight end.
Yeah.
He looks like a big wideout.
A guy that certainly, I think, has a bright future ahead of him, especially in that offense, the way that they play. Last player I want to talk about, last element of this game or this team I want to talk about is the run game from a personnel standpoint. Dalvin Cook, really playing the best football of his career. Take us
Without
through.
question.
Is there something about him? Because I'm going to go through my notes on him later in the show. Is there something about him, the way that he's playing now, that has surprised you, or is it about what you expected coming out of FSU?
I would say it's about what I expected, because to me, what stands out most to me about him is he's really kind of a space runner. They do outside zone. I don't think he's weak, but the way their run game has played out this year, he hasn't broken a ton of tackles.
Right.
I mean, he just gets it and goes.
I will say his contact balance, I don't want to give away too much for what I'll say. His contact balance has impressed me a little bit. Even his ability when he takes a hit in his lower half to just kind of contort his body and stay alive and keep going. That's been impressive. He's not a power runner.
But I think he can do that once he gains momentum.
That's fair.
In other words, I don't think he's
not taking that in the backfield.
Right. And because of the nature of their run game, I don't think he's worked a lot in confined space.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think he's incredibly explosive. I think he's a velocity and momentum runner. When he gets going, he's a tough guy to tackle. And, in the open field, he's kind of got a subtle shiftiness to him. I wouldn't call him, you don't see him stop and start. And
he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey wiggle in the hole.
No, he's not a wiggle guy.
He's not that guy, no.
But there's a subtle elusiveness to him that he can do without really slowing down.
Can I tell you another guy that's really impressed me in that backfield? C.J. Ham.
They use him in a lot of ways.
He is a hammer.
They play a lot with a fullback.
They play a lot with a fullback. I've got some clips saved that will roll out later this week where he is just destroying, melting players on the perimeter and at the second level. They line him up in line against the Jets or against the Giants a little bit.
No, they do.
They do some different things.
He moves all around, without question.
The rookie running back, third-round pick, Alexander Madison, was a guy you and I both studied coming out of Boise State this year.
Yeah, and I... To be honest with you, I didn't love him, but he's shown more juice now than he did, I thought, at Boise State.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But the other guy I want to mention, I think, is Amir Abdullah.
It's a big part of what they do.
He's becoming a big part, and I think because they don't want Cook to be worn out after half the season, Abdullah's becoming kind of their third down back.
Yep.
And I think that's a role that fits him well.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing some different things with, just
sometimes
backfield
they both
action.
play together, too.
That's the thing, is that you saw more of that this week against New York, where those two were on the field together.
But Abdullah's a good receiver. He still has some explosiveness. If it's 3rd and 4, you have to be careful about him running the football.
Yep.
So they have a nice backfield trio.
Yeah.
And if you count Ham, 4 guys, a quartet. But I'm talking about the explosive elements. They've got a nice backfield trio.
Yeah, draws and screens with Amir Abdullah. Keep an eye out for that for sure. Well, Greg, excited to break this matchup down. Actually, I've got one other question for you. There's a big game here this week in the NFL that you may not watch when it comes to Monday morning, but it could influence who is the first overall pick next
You're talking
April's
about
draft.
Washington, Miami?
We got Washington versus Miami.
Yeah.
How do you like that matchup?
I haven't given it a lot of thought, Fran.
I know. I wanted to spring it on you. It was something that I thought about today. I was like, well, this is going to...
I found it very interesting that Bill Callahan, who's now the interim head coach, basically came out and said that there's no chance Dwayne Haskins will even be considered playing.
I think
what was the quote? What was the coach?
It was something. I don't remember the exact quote, but it was basically, it hasn't been decided yet, but Dwayne Haskins is 3rd string.
Which kind of says a lot.
Right.
I mean, because you and I are not there
That wasn't
every
the
day.
exact quote, but
right.
paraphrasing.
You and I are not there every day.
Right, yep.
And it's easy on the outside to say, put him in there. But when a coach says that, who's there every day, that tells you that they for the kids' sake, they can't put him out there.
Right.
So we'll see how that plays out.
All right, well, we'll see. So I can't get any kind of breakdown on how this game's going to go. Huh?
No.
I figured it was going to be the case.
I probably won't be watching that in great detail.
That's what I said. You're not going to be great. You're not going to be watching that film first thing Monday morning when you come in. Well, look, excited to break that. This is going to be a fun game, Eagles and the Vikings. We've got a lot of these.
It should be a very
intense
game.
It should be. It should be. It's going to be a hard-fought game for sure. Well, Greg, look forward to talking about it with you next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Thanks for joining us on Chalk Talk. Great stuff from Greg, and you could follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all of the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Make sure you check out our All-22 review, where this week I broke down some of the key plays that happened in Sunday's game. I'm breaking down that stuff as it happens on Sundays, so you can go check them out. They get posted to PhiladelphiaEagles.com and the Eagles mobile app as the game is going on. So make sure you go give that a look. And obviously all of our podcasts, the Journey to the Draft podcast, the Eagles Insider podcast with Dave Spadaro. We've got so much going on from an audio standpoint on a weekly basis. So make sure you go check all of those out wherever podcasts can be found. And while we're at it, go give us a rating, leave us a comment. It's the best way to give us some support. And I wanted to give a shout out to some people that did exactly that. We'll start off with Eagles fan in Giantland, who left a 5-star review and had a very good question. Said they learned something new every show. It said, would you explain the difference between inside zone and outside zone run plays? So Eagles fan in Giantsland, really the big thing is, with both plays, you're trying to get the defense to move horizontally, right? To move east-west, sideline to sideline, to help create some kind of a crease. And especially, it's really evident on those outside zone plays where you're essentially trying to stretch the front side, get them moving sideline to sideline, and get some kind of a cutback lane on the backside. A crease is going to develop somewhere as long as everybody up front is doing their job. And really, you're making things easy for the offensive line because all they have to do is worry about the person that's directly to the whatever side that you're running. So if you're running it to the right, whatever defender shows up in the gap to the right, that's who that offensive lineman or that tight end has to block. If it's someone that crosses their face and goes over to the left, that's the other guy's problem. They have to worry about that on the backside. So it makes things pretty simple for the offensive line. You need athletic players there, whether it's inside zone or outside zone. You like those offensive linemen to be able to move. But then also for the running back, that's where you preach about patience and being able to find the crease and read the defense, understand how to be able to kind of navigate that. We had Jeff Stoutland on Eagles Game Plan last week, and he talked about with the running back, you just kind of it's like surfing. You have to ride the wave. That's how those running backs have to operate in those zone run schemes. Is you're trying to be able to figure out how the defense is deployed. Are they going to stretch and run sideline to sideline? Is anybody attacking downhill? Where is that crease going to open up? Where is that hole going to develop? And you want to be able to be patient up through to the hole and then use that burst to fly through it. And that's why you've seen so many running backs that maybe weren't the most athletic or the most physically gifted be really, really effective in those schemes. You think back to most recently, Alfred Morris in Washington was such a good zone runner for Kyle Shanahan in those schemes, from Mike Shanahan before that, with all that they were asked to do in those zone run schemes. And, we see backs all around the NFL that are very, very effective in those schemes. So the big difference really, I guess, between inside and outside is just the angle of departure for both the offensive line and the running back. For the for outside zone, you're going to see it be much more of a wider, more outside step for the offensive line and for the running back. So that departure is going to be more towards the sideline. Where inside zone, the running back, the offensive lineman, it's a little bit flatter of a step. They're staying a little bit more square. You're still trying to get those cutback lanes and try and find where that hole is going to develop, but it's just a little bit more defined on those outside zone. You're going to see a lot more width on those initial steps from the running back and from the offensive lineman. Really good question there from Eagles fan in Giants land. Next question, or next comment from Sports Savant, left a 5-star review saying how much they enjoy the back and forth between Greg and myself. They love the instant memory of players' alma maters. Well, that's what we do. Really appreciate that, Sports Savant. And then also Mild Opinions left a 5-star review with a really just a long, thorough, in-depth response about how much they enjoy the show and how they listen each and every week. Really, really appreciate. Very, very kind of you to leave that kind of review, Mild Opinions. So great stuff there from Eagles fan in Giants land, Sports Savant, Mild Opinions. Thank you to you three and all of you out there for listening, whether it's on PhiladelphiaEagles.com and the mobile app or on all or any of our podcast channels. All right, let's keep this thing going. Let's now advance to our scouting report segment where I'm going to read my notes on Dalvin Cook coming out of Florida State.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the scouting report.
All right, well, let's get now to my notes on Dalvin Cook. And this was a player that, was a little mercurial. Some people were really, really high on Dalvin Cook, thought he'd be, one of the one or two best running backs in the class. Some people not as high. And obviously there were some, there was some stuff in the background with Dalvin Cook, and you weren't sure, what you were getting. So there was a little bit of a, we'll say, a mixed bag in terms of what the reports were on Dalvin Cook from a media standpoint. But just off the film, this kid had lots and lots of talent, and you're seeing that come to fruition here this season now that he's fully healthy. I'll just go to my notes now. 2-year starter playing for Jimbo Fisher in that pro-style offense. You saw 1 and 2 back sets. You saw a good mix of zone and gap schemes. They did a really good job, I thought, at Florida State of using misdirection, just trying to find him to get him in space against the flow of the defense, take advantage of that speed. He had home run speed, and he still has home run speed in the NFL. He just moves at a different gear, a burner that gets to top speed very quickly, could make a house call at any point on the field. If you hesitate or false step at any point as a defender, especially at the second or third level, he was going to make you pay. Always made guys look bad if they took bad angles in space. That continues here in the NFL, especially this season. They've really done a really nice job of getting him in space, getting him up to the second level, and with his speed, he can make people look silly. He's had some really big runs for that team so far through the first 5 games. He didn't test well at the combine, but I thought on film he played like a good athlete. That wasn't something that was a concern for me. He did test poorly at the combine, but on film, you saw the change of direction. You saw the lateral movement. Obviously, the short area linear stuff as well was all there on film, so that was not a concern for me. I thought he had solid vision, and even times where he did hesitate a little bit, I thought that he had that speed and that burst to make up for it, so that was not something that I thought would be a hindrance. I thought that he tried to fight through contact pretty well. He kept his feet churning on contact, would fight for extra yardage. I thought he was a solid receiver out of the backfield. He was good on screens. He could be used on wheel routes out of the backfield as well, so used in different ways. He wasn't necessarily moved around the formation. I thought that part was a little bit overrated from a media standpoint coming into the league, but this was a guy that could impact out of the backfield as a receiver, no question. They do some really good things, as we talked about earlier, in the passing game with Dalvin Cook and with those running backs. So that's something certainly to watch for in this game. From a negative standpoint, he had an athletic build, long arms, but I thought he had a thin lower half. He only weighed 210 pounds at the combine. So I and other people had a lot of concerns about, okay, is this guy going to be able to handle a full workload? Can he be a foundation back at any given point? Can he be a primary ball carrier at any point? Obviously, he has proven that that is not going to be a concern for him. At times, I thought he would bounce outside a little bit too quickly. We see that with speed backs at college level. They trust that speed a little bit too much at times, and that would be an issue for him in the NFL. Haven't seen that on film this season. That's something that he has certainly shaken. The big thing for me that, watching him, and I put this in my notes, was, he ran through more arm tackles as a junior than he did at any point in his career. I studied him actually all 3 years at Florida State, but that was not something I viewed as a strength for his. His contact balance was not something I said, you know what, this is going to be a strength of his moving on to the NFL. I didn't see him as a guy that would, his offensive line, they didn't always do him many favors. He saw a lot of contact behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage. And there were times where he made some people miss, but that was not something I said, man, he's going to have that at the next level. In fact, Kareem Hunt was a player that I thought was actually a little bit higher than Cook in this class because of his ability to create yardage for himself in that manner. I didn't see that with Cook. On film now, his contact balance is very, very impressive with Minnesota. That's something that I clearly missed on in terms of being a strength in his game, and he has taken that to another level here this season in Minnesota. He's got the ability to make that first man miss with contact balance, which is very, very impressive. The big negative, and I think this is still an issue for him, is pass protection. I said at best he will be serviceable at the next level. 2 times I thought he was a little indecisive. His technique needed to get a little bit better. He didn't always put everything into it when he would go into the point of contact, that point of truth there, the point of no return, taking on blitzers, and that's something I'd still like to see him improve on here coming now that he's 3 years into his NFL career. But pass protection, one big thing, and then ball security. He fumbled 4 times in 14 games that I studied in his college career. He lost 1. He put 1 in the ground in the red zone. He actually lost 1 in the red zone this past week as well against the New York Giants. Speaking of that, so ball security was also a little bit of a concern for me coming into the NFL. So ball security and pass protection, kind of 2 things you worry about with young running backs coming in the league. That gave me a little bit of pause, especially, he didn't test well at the combine. There were just some red flags there with him that gave you a little bit of pause with Dalvin Cook. But ultimately, my final note on him, as my overall mission statement with him, I guess. There were red flags, and he's definitely got some buyer beware to him, but he's got the ability to be a starter in an off-tackle, perimeter, or cutback scheme, and that's exactly what they've got now with Gary Kubiak. Not one where he's got to often work downhill between the tackles. Again, I kind of undervalued his ability to run through contact, but he might be better off ultimately as a lightning running back and a running back by committee. And again, he has outperformed that expectation. I wrote down D'Angelo Williams and Chris Johnson as comparisons. I want to give some credit to Josh Norris. He was big on the D'Angelo Williams comparison with him coming out. I saw a little bit more CJ2K because of that speed, that ability to impact the game and create those big plays. Well, no matter how you slice it, we talked about him earlier in the show. Dalvin Cook is the guy you've got to stop in this Minnesota offense, the way that they are playing right now. Run game, pass game, he is a game breaker for them. You know, you've got those stud receivers on the outside, but Dalvin Cook is the guy that you've got to stop in this Minnesota offense. So those were my notes on him coming out of Florida State. Really appreciate everybody that tuned in this week to the to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. We will see you next week. Much thanks to Greg Cosell, as always, and all of you out there listening. Thanks for joining us here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.